Challenges presented to healthcare leaders are growing daily. So it's important that leaders in healthcare systems can learn from each other, not just within national healthcare systems, but also across regional boundaries and indeed the whole of the world.
The world is getting much smaller in many respects. The population is growing. There's a much greater ageing population, a changing demographic profile.
Of course, demographic profiles do differ. There are a lot of similarities across the world, but here in the GCC region, it is different. There are different profiles. And there's a huge change in terms of the age and gender distribution across GCC states. We know, for example, that the population in the GCC states spikes at round about 30 to 40 years of age and then drops again after the 50s. And much of the reason for that is because of the expatriate population that live in Dubai under a residential permit. However, the ageing population is still a major issue for the GCC states, and what that needs is much more of an integrated effort to deal with those members of the ageing population who often present with multiple long-term conditions. So that represents a first major challenge for healthcare leaders across the world, but also here in the GCC region. And it's important to ensure that the integration support that can be provided to that elderly population and also other vulnerable groups can be tailored to the needs within your own country and within your region. There's another major challenge, and that is to give prevention as much priority as treatment. And if we're able to put much more energy, much more effort and much more resources into preventing illness in the first place rather than treating it, the benefits will be clear to all, and the health of the nation will be substantially better. The World Health Organization use a number of indicators to look at the general health of nations, and these relate to non-communicable diseases, and these are very often linked to high mortality rates. And there are a number of such non-communicable diseases that are evident in GCC countries which are higher than the average, and this includes cardiovascular disorder and diabetes. And the causes of these are often manifold and relate to poor diet, lack of physical activity, too much smoking. And these can be prevented. So prevention needs to be given a great higher priority than treatment. And this results in this second leadership challenge for healthcare systems across the world, but also specifically here in the GCC region. The third challenge relates to investment in healthcare. And in this respect, the main measure used is gross domestic product per capita in the population. However, in the GCC, looking at this type of data can actually be misleading because of the high proportion of expatriates who work in the region and the difference in earnings in relation to the resident population and other expatriates within different groups. So a better way of looking at this within the GCC region and in comparison with other parts of the world is to look at what's called total healthcare expenditure. And total healthcare expenditure looks at a number of key indicators: the number of beds per thousand population, the number of physicians per thousand population, and the number of nurses per thousand population. And again, the World Health Organization identify that the ratios are lower in the GCC countries than in the OECD countries. Therefore, there are gaps in terms of the resources that are being distributed to healthcare systems around the region. But having said that, healthcare systems in the GCC are very good. There's very good standards of clinical care, very good standards of management within the healthcare systems, but there remain many, many challenges. And these challenges are ones that I've seen across the world in different healthcare systems, which is why we feel that it's very important to learn from each other across the globe and to share good ideas. And one of the key reasons for that is that Healthcare is a fundamental human right, and that's been identified by the World Health Organization. Therefore, if healthcare is a fundamental human right, one of the main challenges for healthcare leaders is to ensure that everybody has access to healthcare in a timely, cost-effective and efficient way. And although this is a master's programme, and obviously we need to be able to include the high quality of teaching within our programme, it's more than that. It's about preparing leaders to be better leaders and to improve the outcomes for nations in their healthcare systems. It's also about those individual leaders being able to feed back their learning into not only their organisation but their healthcare system in general. So our programme has been designed in a different way. We've moved away from the traditional notion of classroom-based teaching to one which we call blended learning. Now, blended learning is a well-known description in today's world, but the term is what I would call bandied about so often that there are so many different meanings of blended learning that it's difficult to actually identify the right approaches. We've looked in detail at this, and our blended learning, we think, is unique and is specifically designed to support the aims of our programme, which is to increase the ability of healthcare leaders to respond to the challenges that I've already spoken about briefly. So the main learning takes place online, but through what we call our virtual learning environment. And the best way of describing this, it's our virtual campus. So if you've been on a traditional academic programme and you go to a traditional university, you'll receive your learning face-to-face within the classroom. We do this through our virtual learning environment. But we don't just leave the programme participants to their own devices. Firstly, we use cutting-edge e-learning activities that really support the learning in a very significant way. And we use as much of the available different types of media as possible, ranging from videos and podcasts right the way through to e-learning based scenarios where we can actually present a series of scenarios allowing participants to select which option he or she would prefer. But we also provide strong tutorial support, online certainly, and we do that online through live webinars, but also discussion forums, and there is a significant engagement between myself as the programme director and my colleagues who will be acting also as tutors on this programme. So there will be that regular contact. But research also shows that even that form of blended learning requires some face-to-face support. So the other main aspect of our design is to support the learning with residential workshops. And these are vitally important to our programme design. And through our programme, there will be 4 residential workshops, 2 per year, and in the Dubai Centre, we will be running intensive 5-day workshops on each occasion. And part and parcel of that will be to share your learning with us as tutors and academics, but most importantly, to learn from each other, from your own healthcare systems. In support of this, we also use an approach called action learning and applied leadership challenges. So what does that mean? Well, firstly, action learning originated back in the 1950s, and in fact was the founding father of action learning was Professor Reg Revens, who was a professor at Manchester Business School some time ago now. But it's now a very well regarded and accepted approach to learning. And what it means is that we put programme participants into small groups of between 4 and 5 members. The aim is to then use each other's support to problem solve real live problems from the workplace, to bring that to the action learning set, to apply the learning that participants receive from our teaching, and then take that back to the workplace and apply it so that there is a positive impact on the healthcare leadership within their own organisation. And following on from that, cumulatively, it can also provide strong support in improving the healthcare system as a whole. Another point that leads on from this is that of assessment. Yes, it is a master's programme. We do need to undertake assessments. We are a very well-known and reputable world university, and we need to ensure that our academic standards are maintained. However, we've also developed our assignments in a way that will support the application of original thinking in your workplace, in the participants' workplace. We don't do examinations, we do written assessments, and we do look for evidence as to how that is being applied in practice within healthcare organisations. So who can benefit from this programme, and what benefits will each individual participant receive? Well, firstly, our view of the healthcare system is very diverse. We want to encourage as many people as possible from different aspects of healthcare systems to join our programme and learn together. And we do have clinicians. We also have non-clinicians who may be managers, general managers of healthcare organisations, but we also encourage other support, corporate directors, healthcare workers, social workers, the residential nursing care sector, which is critically important in terms of healthcare systems and integrated care, but also the pharmaceutical industry. So our view on the benefits of joining this programme is huge. And already we've seen evidence where a well-experienced physician and a very experienced deputy director actually shared their ideas on the leadership challenges and learnt so much from each other. So that's who can benefit from this programme. First and foremost, as I said at the beginning, it's about gaining that much greater international perspective, to learn from other healthcare systems around the world. Because I know from my visits and knowledge of healthcare systems around the world that we all face the same challenges. It's just that the context differs. So being able to share those ideas is vitally important. And that is the first of what we call our golden threads of the programme, the first of four. And what is a golden thread? Let me just very briefly explain that. A golden thread is something that will run throughout the programme, and in effect it's its backbone. And everything that we do in terms of our design and everything that programme participants do in terms of their learning and their assessment will be linked into these four golden threads. The first of which, just to reiterate, is international perspectives. The second golden thread is leading through networks. Leadership in the 21st century is no longer what it used to be. You don't lead within a silo. You don't lead within your own department. You don't even lead within your own organisation. Healthcare is the biggest industry in the world, and it requires collaboration not only between departments within healthcare systems but beyond as well. So we've put a very strong focus on collective leadership, putting the ship into leadership and moving away from this idea of the individual all-knowing leader to a collective form of leadership where leaders ask the intelligent questions, enable collective others to actually come up with solutions to the problems. So that's the second golden thread, leading through networks. The third golden thread is about innovation and creativity. It's about working smarter. And I hear all too often, particularly in many healthcare systems and other public services that have suffered from the 2008 financial crisis, that we need to do more with less. No, it's not about doing more with less. It's about doing things differently with less. It's about acknowledging that there are different ways of doing the work and there are different ways of leading. Greater connected world than ever we have before. And we at Manchester believe in what's being increasingly termed the wisdom of the crowds, the access to social media, the access to e-health information, the access to information that can help people to change their lives is much greater. And we as healthcare leaders need to be able to maximise the opportunities that these new forms of communication present. So that's our third golden thread, to think differently, to think out of the box, to understand that there are different ways of responding to challenges and not just relying upon what has been tried and tested in the past. The fourth and final golden thread is what we see as being the most important, and that is putting the patient at the heart of everything that healthcare leaders do. That sounds like a given, That sounds like that ought to occur as a matter of course, but I know, and I think you would know, that that is not always the case. And there is a need to put the patient at the centre. The patient, their carers and their family. And what we actually say to our programme participants is the standard for that is quite simple. Think about how you would want one of your loved ones to be treated if they were unfortunate enough to be treated by a healthcare system. That is the standard that you should apply to any patient who enters a healthcare system. So those are our 4 golden threads, and these are the benefits that programme participants will get out of their study by increasing their understanding of international perspectives, by understanding that leadership is across networks, that there is a need to think differently, to encourage creativity and innovation, and finally, and most importantly, is to put the patient at the heart of everything that the healthcare system does. The final aspect that I want to talk about is really to come full circle in terms of benefits. We've talked about who can benefit from this programme in terms of where they work within the healthcare system. We've talked about the benefits that individual participants will get from their programme of study. But I want to finish with just briefly describing the benefits that can accrue to healthcare organisations in supporting their healthcare leaders to develop themselves as leaders. Given the way in which we've designed our programme, it's as flexible and adaptive as it could possibly be. If a healthcare organisation, for example, were to sponsor a number of programme participants to come on the MSc in International Healthcare Leadership, then part of what we do, again running all the way through the programme, is to ensure that participants align their learning to the values, the vision, the aims and their objectives of the organisation within which they work. And as I've said previously, this is a master's programme. It does need to be assessed, but our assessment is very much about impact in the workplace. It's not just about displaying their knowledge of the theories that we talk about. Theories are important, but we need to ensure that those theories are understood in the most practical and interesting way, but most importantly, then applied to the workplace. And that is a critical part of our design. And by supporting healthcare leaders to come on our programme, there is most definitely a critical payback to the organisation in terms of the application of the learning to practice. And finally, because this is an international healthcare leadership programme, which we intend to continue to develop in all of our centres around the world, it's not just about the 2 years on the programme. At the end of the programme, participants become part of our alumni. They are part of the University of Manchester for the rest of their lives in terms of the networks that they create. And what we hope to be able to do is to draw together the networks from the different international centres where our programme participants are learning. So in effect, our long-term aim is to create a network of international action learning where international applied leadership challenges can be shared across the globe.
The countries that make up the GCC, quite rightly, are proud of their long and traditional history. And over the years, there have been significant developments, particularly over the last 50 to 60 years, as the benefits of oil revenues have resulted in significant changes across all cities and all countries within the GCC. As these countries have prospered and the populations within them, we have seen significant improvements in relation to healthcare across the GCC. However, we are at a position where the revenues from oil are diminishing, and there is clearly a recognition in all governments in the GCC that more needs to be done to support the healthcare systems in the region. Clearly, prevention is being given a significant priority over treatment, but more needs to be done. This programme will help healthcare leaders not only to continue the significant improvements that have been made alongside the tremendous advances that have been made in each of the countries, but also there is a need to look at how this success can be sustained and how the communities of the region can continue to receive an improved level of healthcare. There's a lot that the world can learn from healthcare systems in the GCC, but there's also a lot that healthcare leaders in the GCC can learn from other healthcare systems. This is a key strand of our programme, and we hope that through our programme, healthcare leaders will continue to build significant improvements to healthcare and in ensuring that healthcare becomes a fundamental human right in relation to the quality of access and clinical care.